Okay, America, welcome back to Politics 101 with Dan Gonzales. I'm Dan Gonzales, of course, and I want to welcome you all back. We have a special guest that just arrived with us. I sent out an email to most of you, and you knew that Marshall DeRosa, Dr. Marshall DeRosa, was going to show up tonight. And he and I had a conversation earlier today, and he was telling me about what he was teaching his students or some of the things he was going over with his students. Marshall, why don't you go ahead and explain what's been going on here and what you've discovered here over all this new, I guess, state of emergency we're going through here.
Well, it's really, gee, I don't know how detailed you want me to get regarding the, how should I put it, the quarantine executive orders that have been more or less promulgated by the executive branch of Florida. But we were talking about judicial review and the relationship between constitutional law, statutory law, and administrative law. So we have this administrative law, which is essentially mandates that were given to the various county public health officials that under certain circumstances that individuals could be quarantined. And I Googled some of the information, went to the Florida Code. So for example, under this Emergency Act, and it's under, I forget which article of the Florida Constitution, but it's titled Military Affairs. I think it's Title 23 or something along those lines. But it reads, for example, and I'm going to fill in the blanks, this is standardized for all the states in Florida, that a public health official could come to your house or your place of employment and require you to be vaccinated. And this is the voluntary form, so there's a voluntary form. And then they have a variety of other forms that go from compliance to non-compliance, from quarantine in your house to detention in your house, from detention to removal to a detention facility, and then to a higher level detention facility. And if you continue to be a non-compliant Floridian, or even a resident of Florida, then criminal sanctions kick in. So it goes from civil to criminal. And essentially it simply says to the effect that under certain conditions, and this is why public health officials in all 67 counties are dealing with this now, if H1N1 becomes a pandemic, the state of Florida, and of course you have Department of Homeland Security and the Health and Human Services at the national level, can require you to be vaccinated if it's in the public interest. And if you resist, and the terminology is you're non-compliant, the language is somewhat degrading, then you could be in a lot of trouble. But you know, the bigger picture here, Dan, is that Floridians and American citizens in general are fearful of their government.
Yes.
And the reason why they're fearful of their government is because they either know intellectually or viscerally that they have lost control of the government, so they don't trust it. Government is not based upon our consent, but we have become more or less subjects of the government. So this is fine. If there's a pandemic and everything's on the up and up, we'd want the government, the state of Florida, it's constitutionally required to protect the health, safety, and morals of Floridians. But the untold story here is that, and for good reason, we simply don't trust government.
Right.
And that's why there's so much concern about this.
Well, we were talking about how severe the H1N1 was compared to the regular flu season, the regular flu. And obviously it's not, they're even saying it themselves, releasing reports, that it's not going to be as severe. Yet they're gearing up as if it's going to be the worst thing that's come since, we were talking about that earlier. Why didn't they do this with AIDS?
Well,
I mean, I think we would have probably been happy about that with the AIDS if you would have taken some of these people who were carrying around the AIDS virus and locked them into a facility or put them under quarantine because that disease was so deadly. But here we have a flu that doesn't really even...
Yeah, but you know, I can't speak to that because I'm a political scientist and I don't know the science and the medical end of it. But I do know something about politics. And the fact that we're raising these questions shows that there's something wrong. We don't trust our government. And that's a sad state of affairs when we think the government can have an ulterior motive. In other words, the vaccinations are there to, quote, protect public health. But why are so many people concerned about this? So there's something more deeply involved here. And you know, the state government supposedly is more accountable to Floridians than the national government. But after years and years and years of overreaching by the national government, the state government has become an extension of the national government. So we don't trust it either.
Right.
But you have to admit, and I think you would, that not being physicians, we don't have PhDs in microbiology and such. We're just speculating about all these other things, how serious H1N1 is. But we do know this: we don't trust our government, and for good reason. So, and that's from a public policy perspective. That's where it slides into politics. There's something fundamentally wrong.
I mean, you know, through the history of, say, our country, has, you know, any major disease caused our government to do such things? I mean, did malaria cause that? I mean, is there anything throughout our history?
Well, there was, in the early part of the 20th century, there was an epidemic that killed thousands and thousands of people, especially in the northwest of the United States. But the science has changed. So vaccines and vaccinations, they weren't. But just think, somebody knocks on your door, Mr. Gonzales, I'm here to give you your vaccination. And they give you this form that this is standard based upon the Florida Code, voluntary home quarantine agreement. So you take the vaccination, you agree to stay in your house, and it goes from all sorts of things. Once you become non-compliant, you're given an ankle brace, GPS tracking system, you have to wear a mask, they call your house twice a day, you have to give them your body temperature. If you're non-compliant then, and I'm not going to bore you with the language, they come and get you, they put you in a facility, and then they can do whatever they deem necessary to protect the public health. Not only the vaccination, but it's open to bureaucratic interpretation.
Right. And that's what we were just talking about earlier too. Everything that they've put in here leaves an open door for them to take whatever measures they need to make sure they get it under control.
Well, imagine this: I'm non-compliant.
Right.
And public health, and let's assume I do or don't have H1N1 virus. Under this language, they can quarantine me in my house or in some sort of detention facility, take my kids, put them in a foster home or some other facility to auspiciously protect them. And this is the thing this is once again on the Florida Code. It's the quarantine notice that would be put on doors and such.
I think which one is on right now.
If you want to hold it.
This one is up right now.
But this, these are interesting times. There's no question about that. It's a good time to be because think of it. If the American public has been dumbed down to the point where most people will comply without asking questions.
That's right.
And so there are enough of us around to cause enough trouble that hopefully we can have some type of impact on this type of policy. But this will actually come from the Department of Homeland Security at the national level, filter down to the states, from the states to the public health officials. And they'll be the ones that will be responsible for operationalizing this.
Well, you said something earlier, Marshall, just a few minutes ago about, we're not doctors and PhDs and scientists involved in this, but the stats that Rich was reading off here on the death rate was from the CDC themselves. Right. That came directly from them.
But what I'm saying, I don't deny that. Right. But what I'm saying, as an American, as a Floridian, if you read Article 1, the Florida Constitution, Declaration of Rights, we have the right to privacy and unlawful searches and seizures. If they want to do this, they have to establish probable cause, get a court order, convince a judge that there's something in that house or that person that poses a public threat. To do this with a blank check is contrary to our rights. So even if the scientific argument is valid, I don't need to debate that.
Right.
What I debate as a Floridian, I'm protected by the Florida Constitution. And that's my point. So the others are valid, but we could knock heads with the so-called specialists night and day. But our system is structured in such a way we don't need to go there. We're protected by the Constitution.
Now, they're saying that, they said also, my daughter pointed this out to me,